They called them the happiest divorced couple in the world, and for over 20 years that description stuck. Because it seemed to be true, or at least true enough. They divorced in 1996 in one of the most publicly discussed royal separations of its era. They separated legally, financially, officially. And then they kept on living together in the same mansion, raising their daughters under the same roof, presenting to the world an image of post-divorce unity that was so unusual, so persistent, and so apparently genuine that it became one of the defining curiosities of modern royal life. People shook their heads at it and smiled at it and wondered at it in roughly equal measure. How do they do it? Why do they do it? What kind of relationship actually is this, underneath the public label of the happiest divorced couple in the world? Nobody outside the walls of Royal Lodge knew the full answer to those questions, but plenty of people had theories. And some of those theories, it now appears, were considerably closer to the truth than the public image ever suggested, because the arrangement that lasted 20 years is over. Not gradually, not by mutual comfortable agreement, not in the easy way that two people who genuinely like each other might eventually decide to find their own separate paths. It ended with removal trucks and changed locks and a woman who, by all accounts, made a deliberate and very loud choice not to follow her former husband to the isolated farmhouse on a Norfolk estate where his new, reduced, closely managed life would be lived. She refused to go with him, and that refusal, after 20 years of going with him, of staying beside him, of absorbing the consequences of his scandals and offering her loyalty in return for his protection, tells you everything about what the arrangement actually was. What it was built on, and what changed when the foundation shifted in ways that neither of them could manage. Today we are going to go through all of it, the real nature of the Royal Lodge arrangement and what each of them was actually getting from it. The Belgravia townhouse and why its sudden sale told its own story, the daughters caught between parents and an institution that is increasingly unwilling to carry the weight of the York name. And the question that sits underneath the entire story, was this ever really about love and loyalty? Or was it always a deal, and if it was a deal, what happened when the terms stopped working? The arrangement, that DEFIED explanation, let us start with the basic facts of what the Royal Lodge arrangement actually looked like from the outside. Because the facts themselves are remarkable enough to deserve attention before we start explaining them, Sarah Ferguson and Prince Andrew divorced in 1996. At that point, by every legal and social convention that normally applies to the end of a marriage, their shared domestic life should have concluded. Two people. Two lives, two addresses. Instead, Sarah remained at Royal Lodge. The 30-bedroom Windsor residence where Andrew lived as a principal tenant did not become his space alone after the divorce. It became their shared space. Their daughters grew up there. Family events happened there. The physical geography of the marriage continued even after the legal and official reality of it had ended. This arrangement persisted through every subsequent development, through Andrew's professional difficulties, through Sarah's own various public crises, through the Epstein association and the Newsnight interview and the stripping of royal duties and the years of managed institutional distancing. Through all of it, the address remained shared. By the time the arrangement finally ended, it had lasted approximately 28 years past the divorce that was supposed to have concluded it. So the question that everyone who has ever looked at this situation has eventually asked is the obvious one: why? The public explanation, offered with varying degrees of conviction over the years, was centered on the children and on genuine personal warmth. They remained good friends. They co-parented effectively. They chose to prioritize the stability of their daughter's home environment over the conventions of what divorced life is supposed to look like. That explanation is not entirely false. By all accounts, there was genuine warmth between them, and they did co-parent with a level of cooperation that many divorced couples never manage. The friendship was real, but friendship and genuine warmth, as anyone who has thought carefully about this arrangement understands, do not fully account for 28 years of shared address past the legal end of a marriage. There was more to it than that, what each of them was actually GTTING. To understand what the arrangement really was, you have to understand what each person was actually receiving from it, because every sustained arrangement between two people, whatever its surface character, involves an exchange. Something given and something received, and the Royal Lodge arrangement, looked at carefully, had a very specific exchange at its core. Andrew's side of the equation is the more straightforward. He got loyalty. Consistent, sustained, public loyalty from a woman who had every reason and arguably every opportunity to walk away from him and save herself. When the Epstein story broke, Sarah was not a person the palace or the public was required to defend. She was not a working royal, she had no official standing. Her continued association with Andrew was a choice she made, not an obligation she was bound by. She could have created distance. She chose not to. That choice, year after year through scandal after scandal, was extraordinarily valuable to Andrew. It gave him the appearance of a domestic stability that contradicted the institutional picture of a man being progressively removed from royal life. It gave him someone in his corner when the corner was getting very small. And it gave him a buffer between the full weight of public judgment and his daily existence within the walls of the lodge. Sarah's side of the equation requires a little more examination. She got a roof, a significant roof certainly. 30 rooms, grounds. Security, privacy. The kind of physical infrastructure that does not become available to former members of the royal family through any other means once the official status that generated it is gone. But beyond the physical accommodation, she got something arguably more important. She got identity, proximity to the Windsor world without the official standing that would make that proximity formally recognized, gave her a continued relevance that her own independent commercial ventures could not reliably sustain. Book deals, television projects, speaking engagements, charitable roles, all of these were more available to someone who was understood to be meaningfully connected to the royal family than they would have been to someone who was simply a divorced former duchess with a record of financial difficulty. The Royal Lodge address was a golden ticket. It maintained a royal adjacent identity that kept opportunities flowing in ways they would not otherwise have flowed. The arrangement was never purely sentimental. It was a deal, and like all deals, it worked as long as both parties were receiving what they needed from it. The secrets that kept the balance there is one more dimension of the arrangement that deserves direct acknowledgement. Because alongside the practical exchange of accommodation for loyalty, there was something else holding the arrangement together, something less comfortable to articulate but impossible to ignore given everything that is now publicly known. They each held information about the other, not in a hostile or explicitly calculated way. Not as a formal mutual blackmail arrangement with terms and conditions, but as a natural consequence of 28 years of shared intimate knowledge. Two people who have lived together through the most significant events of each other's adult lives, who have seen each other at their worst and their most vulnerable, who have knowledge of decisions and associations and private moments that neither would want fully exposed, have a particular kind of bond. It is not exactly friendship. It is not exactly love, it is the bond of shared exposure. The knowledge that what one person could say about the other gives each of them a reason to be careful about what they say publicly. For Andrew, the concern is obvious. Sarah has been inside the household through decades of the Epstein connection. She has knowledge of relationships, associations, and private dynamics that no official investigation has yet fully accessed. If she chose to speak in detail, the implications could be significant. For Sarah, the concern is equally real in a different direction. Andrew has knowledge of her choices and associations and private decisions over the same period. The emails that have become public are damaging enough. The private knowledge that has not become public could be more damaging still. This mutual exposure created a natural incentive for both of them to maintain the arrangement and to maintain each other's silence. The deal worked in both directions, and for as long as it worked, both of them had reason to preserve it. What changed was the calculation about whether the deal was still providing sufficient return to justify the continued cost, the Belgravia TOWNHOUSC, and what its sale really meant. There is a specific financial decision from this period that deserves particular attention because of what it reveals about Sarah's state of mind and the urgency of her situation. Sarah Ferguson owned a townhouse in Belgravia, one of the most prestigious addresses in London, valued at over £4 million. It was effectively her safety net, her independent asset. The thing she could point to as evidence that she was not entirely dependent on the Royal Lodge arrangement for her security and stability. As the pressure around Royal Lodge reached its peak and Andrew's eviction became increasingly inevitable, Sarah sold the Belgravia property. This decision sent what one account describes as shockwaves through high society, because the timing was precisely wrong from a conventional real estate logic perspective. You do not sell your backup plan at the moment when your main arrangement is collapsing. You hold the backup plan so that you have somewhere to go when the main arrangement fails. Unless you need the cash more urgently than you need the property, she accepted a loss of £400,000 on the sale. A significant sum on an already significant asset. The fact that she was willing to absorb that loss rather than wait for a better moment to sell is the clearest indicator of the financial urgency driving the decision. The cash generated by the sale did not translate into a new permanent home. She did not take the proceeds and establish a stable independent base. Instead, the money appears to have provided what one analysis describes as maneuverability, liquid resources in a situation where liquidity was more valuable than property, because liquidity buys time and options when every other form of stability is gone. But selling your safety net for liquidity when you are homeless is not a strategy, it is a measure of desperation. And the speed and terms of the sale make the desperation visible in ways that the careful management of her public image had previously concealed, the moment SHE refused to follow him. The central and defining moment of this entire story is the one where Sarah made her choice. Andrew was being relocated to Sandringham, to Marsh Farm on the Norfolk estate, to a 5-bedroom farmhouse surrounded by agricultural land, with security fencing and CCTV and the managed, monitored existence of someone being kept within the royal orbit, while being kept away from everything that orbit once meant in practice. Sarah could have followed him, the arrangement could have continued in a new location. The address would have been smaller, the circumstances considerably more modest, the distance from London and from the social world that had sustained her professionally more significant, but the basic structure of the deal could have been preserved. She refused, not quietly. Not in the ambiguous way of someone who simply did not end up accompanying him. According to insiders, she let it be known that she was ready to put massive distance between herself and her former partner. The perk of presenting a united front, she apparently calculated, could no longer outweigh the toxicity of remaining visibly beside him. This was a deliberate and public choice. A statement made through action rather than words. After 28 years of not leaving, she left. Understanding what that choice means requires understanding what she was walking away from and what she was walking toward. She was walking away from the protection of the arrangement, the roof, the identity, the stability, the mutual silence that each of them maintained because each of them had reason to. All of that she chose to leave behind. What she was walking toward was less clear. Autonomy, certainly. Independence in principle. But in practice, given the financial situation and the professional landscape and the absence of any confirmed new base, she was walking toward a considerably more uncertain existence than the one she was leaving. That she made that choice anyway tells you something important. It tells you that the calculation about what the arrangement was costing her versus what it was providing had finally tipped decisively in the direction of leaving. That staying had become more dangerous than going. The daughters caught in the middle. Through all of this, and it is easy to lose sight of them in the drama of their parents, there are two women whose lives have been shaped by decisions they did not make, and who are now dealing with consequences that arrive bearing their name regardless of their own choices. Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie have spent their adult lives trying to build professional and personal identities that are distinct from the chaos their parents have generated. They have had varying degrees of success at this. They are both married, both with children of their own, both with professional commitments and personal lives that are genuinely separate from the Royal Lodge drama in terms of their daily reality. But names travel further than daily reality. And the York name, with everything it now carries, reaches into their professional lives and their social circles and their public presence in ways that their own conduct cannot fully control. The institutional response to the York situation has been increasingly visible in how Beatrice and Eugenie are treated. The absence from Easter events. The reports of being asked to stay away from prominent royal occasions. The gradual narrowing of the spaces in which they are considered welcome within the formal structure of the royal family's public life. They are being required to pay a cost for decisions they did not make. Assessed on the basis of a name they were born with rather than choices they have personally made. And they are doing so while also being the daughters of two people whose situation is deteriorating simultaneously. Their responses have diverged in ways that several accounts have noted. Eugenie has reportedly pulled back substantially, putting distance between herself and any visible association with the situation, creating separation as clearly as she can manage given that the name follows her regardless. Beatrice has tried to maintain a more balanced position, holding loyalty to her father while also protecting her own standing. A position that becomes harder to maintain the more compressed the situation becomes, and the more clearly the palace signals that proximity to the York name creates institutional risk. There are no good choices available to them. Only choices between different kinds of damage. What the split reveals about the deal. Now that the arrangement has ended, it is possible to see its true nature more clearly than was visible while it was ongoing. Because the way something ends often tells you more about what it was than the way it operated during its existence. The arrangement ended not because the two people involved grew apart emotionally, or because their circumstances changed in ways that made continued cohabitation impractical. It ended because the institutional context that had sustained the arrangement collapsed in ways that changed the cost-benefit calculation for both of them. For Andrew, the move to Sandringham was not a choice. It was the result of institutional pressure that he ultimately could not resist however long he delayed it. He did not choose the Marsh Farm address. It was chosen for him. For Sarah, the choice not to follow was exactly that. A choice. The first genuinely free choice she had made about her domestic situation in decades. And she used it to create the distance that she apparently calculated was now more valuable than the arrangement it replaced. That asymmetry tells you something important about what the deal actually was. Andrew needed the arrangement more than Sarah did. He needed the loyalty, the stability, the mutual silence, the continued appearance of a functioning family unit. Sarah needed the address and the identity the address conferred. When Andrew's address became a Norfolk farmhouse on a managed estate rather than a 30-bedroom Windsor residence, the exchange stopped being balanced. The identity value of being associated with Marsh Farm is not the same as the identity value of being associated with Royal Lodge. The professional opportunities generated by a connection to a man living under management at Sandringham are not the same as those generated by a connection to a man living at Windsor. The deal terms changed. And when the deal terms changed, Sarah's calculation changed with them. Where THEY both go from here? Two people running in opposite directions. As one analyst put it to survive, Andrew's direction is defined for him. He is at Marsh Farm, under oversight, within the boundaries of the estate, managed by his brother's private arrangement and the institutional calculation that keeping him contained is less damaging than any alternative. He did not choose his direction. It was chosen for him by the progressive removal of every other option. Sarah's direction is chosen but uncertain. She has the autonomy she apparently decided was worth the cost of the arrangement she left. She has the cash from the Belgravia sale, which bought her time and options but not stability. She has the reputation she has always had, which is complicated in ways that the current scrutiny makes more complicated still. She is reportedly exploring options, trying to find the path to whatever comes next. The book conversations are happening. The interview possibilities are being assessed. The question of whether she can reinvent herself one more time, as she has reinvented herself before, is being worked through in private while the public watches and speculates. The difference between this reinvention attempt and all the previous ones is the context. The Epstein emails are public and specific. The business closures are documented in company records. The sting footage from 2010 is not forgotten. The accumulated weight of the pattern is heavier than it has ever been at any previous moment when she has attempted a reset. Whether a reset is still available to her in those circumstances is the question that nobody who has followed this story carefully can answer with confidence. They called it the happiest divorced couple in the world, and for 20 years the world went along with it. Because it was easier to accept the charming image than to ask the question the image was designed to prevent. What is this really? The answer, now visible in the removal trucks and the changed locks and the deliberate choice not to follow him to Norfolk, is that it was an arrangement. Not purely mercenary. Not without genuine warmth and shared history and the real bond of two people who raised children together and lived through extraordinary circumstances side by side. But an arrangement nonetheless, built on an exchange that served both of them as long as the terms held. Address and identity in exchange for loyalty and silence. The Windsor orbit in exchange for the appearance of family unity. Mutual protection built on mutual knowledge of the kind that neither could deploy without risk to themselves. The arrangement held for 28 years past the divorce that should have ended it. It survived scandals that would have destroyed most relationships. It survived institutional distancing and public humiliation and years of mounting pressure that would have separated most people long before the final break. What it did not survive was the moment the Royal Lodge address became unavailable. The moment the 30 rooms and the grounds and the Windsor location that gave the arrangement its core value were replaced by a 5-bedroom farmhouse under institutional management on a Norfolk estate. The golden ticket expired. And when it expired, the deal that had always been underneath the friendship became visible. Two people who needed each other for specific and calculable reasons no longer needed each other in the same way. The costs had changed. The benefits had changed. And for the first time in 28 years, the calculation pointed in the same direction. Walk away. She did. He could not. And in that difference, everything true about what the arrangement actually was is finally, completely, and permanently visible. The happiest divorced couple in the world has officially ended. Not with warmth or mutual agreement or a dignified and chosen conclusion. With removal trucks, changed locks, a deliberate refusal to follow, and two people running in opposite directions from the ruins of something that was never quite what it appeared to be.